Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's zi8gzag here, welcome back to GeoGuessr Explained. And I got recommended on my main YouTube account today why some countries don't have Google Street View. And I was like, let me watch this as part of this channel because I feel like this is going to be an interesting topic. And it's also something I know quite a lot about. Like if I was going on a quiz show and they had to pick like an area of expertise, I would probably say Google Street View. Like because GeoGuessr is like probably not like a proper topic, but Google Street View like is like a whole thing of its own, and I think compared to the average person, I know a lot. So let's find out if Aaron Atlas's actually is informed or not. I'll give my review of the video, and of course it'll be linked in the description. Let's have a look here, shall we? And as usual, I'm gonna have to switch from double speed to single. Okay, let's see.
For the past 18 years, Google Street View coverage has been expanding across our planet. From its humble beginnings in 2007 with just a few US cities to a massive digital mirror of our world today. What started as an experiment with cameras strapped to a car in California has now mapped millions of miles of roads across more than 100 countries. But when you step back and look at the Street View coverage map, you realize it's more than just a tech project. It's a story about priorities, politics, inequality, and power, told through which parts of our world get mapped and which remain invisible.
That's a really good point. Something I've often mentioned, like sometimes you can tell a lot about a country by the fact that it doesn't have Street View compared to its neighbors. So, okay, interesting.
In this video, we're going to explore the world through Google Street View.
Something worth mentioning before he goes on, Iran has no Google Street View. This is all user-generated content, which is why the creator of the video should have used mapmaking.app to get these images, but he probably doesn't know it exists.
Just to see where you can drop the little yellow man, but to uncover what these maps say about our planet. We'll look at why some countries are completely blank and why others are covered down to the smallest street. By the end, you'll see how this single map quietly tells one of the most fascinating stories about our modern world.
Is that a real voice?
To understand,
I think it's a real voice, but it could be AI. It's getting hard to tell.
How Street View became a global phenomenon, we have to start where it all began. North America, the region that shaped its technology and ambition. Today,
I can't actually tell if that's a real person or not.
It has some of the most complete coverage in the world. In the United States alone, Google has captured almost all public roads. That's close to 4.1 million miles of roads. Canada and Mexico also enjoy strong coverage, particularly in major cities, highways, and tourist destinations. The reason is simple. These countries have robust road networks, high internet penetration, and strong commercial incentives for Google. The US and Canada rank among the wealthiest nations, with GDP per capita above $85,000 in the US and $54,000 in Canada, making them high-value markets for Google's services. Europe tells a similar story. From Lisbon to Warsaw, nearly every road is painted blue on the Street View map. Wealthier Western nations...
Yeah, that's not entirely true for Europe. There are many countries further east where a lot of roads are missing. Even countries that look fairly densely covered. For example, you could say like Turkey. Yeah, it's fairly densely covered, but there's a lot missing.
France and the UK have had full coverage for years, while even many Eastern European countries now enjoy extensive imagery. This reflects Europe's high urbanization rate, advanced infrastructure, and strong tourism industry. Although privacy regulations in the EU are strict, Google has adapted by implementing automated face and license plate blurring, ensuring Street View remains a widely available tool. In contrast, Africa...
Well, it's a little bit sloppish so far, this video. Not entirely so. It's still got... I mean, it's just not really new information to me, I guess. But let's continue. Maybe we will get some insights as to why some countries don't have Street View.
Highlights the other side of the story. Most of the continent is blank on the Street View map, with notable exceptions like South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal, where coverage exists in cities and tourist areas. Sub-Saharan Africa has some of the world's highest poverty rates, with 34% of the population living on less than $2 a day, according to the World Bank. Combined with limited paved road networks and political instability in some countries, Street View expansion here has been slow and selective. Asia presents a mixed picture. Highly developed economies like Japan...
Don't really have too much to say about what he said about Africa. But I guess it would have been interesting for him to dive into why the countries that do have Street View have it, because that's kind of the more interesting question, right? Like, why did they give it to Ghana? Ghana's a very poor country, and yet Ghana's had Street View for years, and they're redoing it again. So, just an interesting question. As for me, I think it's probably because of like the high English speaking rate, and it's kind of more integrated into the kind of, like Anglosphere, or like kind of the English speaking economy, I guess. But I'm not really sure. Would have been an interesting question to ask.
And South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore are deeply mapped, reflecting their high incomes and strong technological adoption.
Okay, so far what we have is that rich countries have it and poor countries don't, but I hope we get a bit deeper than that.
America falls somewhere in between. Countries like Brazil, Chile, and Argentina have fairly strong coverage, particularly in urban areas and along major roads. But in poorer nations such as Bolivia, Guyana, and Suriname, Street View is either partial or absent. Economic factors explain much of this. South America's average GDP per capita is around $8,000 to $10,000, far lower than in North America and Europe. Additionally, the logistical challenges of mapping vast rural and Amazonian regions create a clear digital divide. In Oceania,
I don't know, I feel like the Amazon's actually pretty nicely covered, considering how many roads are there. The thing is, like, a lot of times they don't go by streets, they go by the river instead, so...
The Street View map tells two very different stories, one of rich, connected nations like Australia and New Zealand, and another of small Pacific islands that barely appear at all. It's not that Google ignored them, it's that these nations are small, remote, and often have limited digital infrastructure. The difference is striking. Australia's GDP per capita stands at around $62,000, while in nearby Papua New Guinea, it's under $5,000. But not all of them can be explained by poverty or infrastructure.
Okay.
Some are the result of politics and government restrictions. For certain countries, mapping streets with 360-degree cameras is...
The way he said 360-degree, like, if it is a human, that's kind of a strange way to say it. But, if you're watching this, and I'm reacting to your video, and you are actually the voice, then I'm sorry. I'm just trying to work it out.
Seen not as a tool for navigation or tourism, but as a potential national security risk. And perhaps the most interesting place to look at on this map is Belarus. Unlike its neighbors like Poland, Lithuania, or even Russia, which have at least partial Street View coverage, Belarus remains almost entirely absent.
Yeah, the only place in Belarus that has Street View is like the downtown of Minsk with the backpack.
Belarus has some of the strictest mapping and geospatial data laws in Europe. Since the early 2000s, the government has treated detailed mapping as a matter of national security. Companies like Google face restrictions on where and how they can collect imagery, with licenses tightly controlled by state authorities. At the same time, Belarus is one of the least open countries in Europe when it comes to internet freedom. According to Freedom House's 2024 report, Belarus scored just 28 out of 100 on internet freedom, classifying it as not free. In such an environment, it's no surprise that Google hasn't been allowed to drive camera cars across the country's roads. Another example is...
Yeah, I agree, that's the main reason for Belarus, for sure.
China. Despite being home to the world's second largest economy and some of the most modern cities on the planet, China has no Street View coverage at all. This isn't because of technical limitations. It's because Google's services have been heavily restricted or outright banned in the country since 2010. Mapping and geospatial data are tightly...
So was Google actually just able to be used before 2010 in China? That's kind of interesting.
Controlled by the Chinese government, which treats them as sensitive state assets. As a result, the absence of blue lines across China on the Street View map reflects not a lack of development, but a deliberate political choice. India tells a similar story, though with a different outcome. For years, India blocked Street View from fully rolling out, citing national security concerns. Security agencies, particularly after the 2008 Mumbai attacks, rejected Google's plans outright. The government worried that detailed images of roads, government buildings, and military facilities could be misused.
And to be honest, it's a valid concern. Like, I don't really dwell on it too much, but knowing the exact layout of a city, if you were like invading it or something like that, would be significantly helpful, right? I think obviously maps exist for pretty much everywhere via satellite, but And like drones exist now as well, but I can just see it being like a tool of war potentially. And I wonder if in the future Google will ever delete Street View in a country for that reason or what. Like, it's kind of curious to think about what might happen in that regard.
Google did the minimum, limited pilot projects in places like Bangalore, but they were swiftly halted. By 2016, the government categorically rejected Street View nationwide. In response, India introduced the Geospatial Information Regulation Bill of...
Yeah, so what he referred to just before is that they did actually do a bit of Street View with the Generation 3 car around Bangalore, and I don't think it was ever published, or if it was deleted. But they did do a tiny bit here and there in the country, which you can still see with the Trekker coverage. It's kind of similar to Belarus.
2016, aiming to tightly control the collection and dissemination of map data. Although the bill was never passed, new rules introduced in 2021 allowed limited mapping, but only by Indian companies. Foreign firms now have to work with local partners and can only use maps with lower accuracy. Only in 2022 did India begin allowing Street View, but under strict conditions. The data is now collected by local partners like Tech Mahindra and Genesis International, not directly by Google. Conflict has had...
But the big thing is, of course, they just allowed Google to bring in their own cameras. I still think it's like done by subcontractors, but now we have the high quality camera. So yeah, it's a good result in India, and it's going to be interesting to see if it actually does completely roll out for the whole country. But yeah, obviously that's a country where we weren't really too optimistic before 2022, and then everything changed, so it was quite cool.
A major impact on mapping coverage across the Middle East. In many countries, ongoing wars and political instability have made it difficult or even dangerous to collect accurate geographic data on the ground. Surveying teams, for example, cannot safely operate in war zones, so governments and international organizations must rely heavily on remote sensing instead. Even then, access to high-resolution imagery is often restricted due to security concerns or international sanctions. In places like Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, years of conflict have destroyed infrastructure, changed landscapes, and displaced entire populations, making old maps outdated and new data unreliable. Political divisions also mean that different groups may produce conflicting versions of maps to assert territorial control or legitimacy. A clear example is the long-running India-Pakistan dispute over Kashmir, where each country's official maps show the region as fully their own. To avoid political backlash,
and it's interesting because it actually does have Street View in some parts, so my intuition is that India has more control over it. Otherwise, how would we have Street View there? But, you know, that's just an interesting one.
Companies and global map providers often blur, simplify, or adjust borders in such sensitive zones. In some cases...
Okay, true, but let's go back here. Israel-Palestine, there's coverage on both sides, obviously not in Gaza, but in West Bank. And then Kosovo is getting Street View right now. So I don't know if these are great examples because they're actually getting Street View, both of them, or have Street View. So
Political backlash. Satellite companies and global map providers often blur, simplify, or adjust borders in such sensitive zones. In some cases, users in India and Pakistan even see slightly different versions of the same map. A quiet reminder that geography can be as political as it is physical. Meanwhile, peaceful and stable countries like Qatar, the UAE, and Oman are well mapped and encourage open data compared to the war-torn or authoritarian states, which have...
At this point, you could also mention that the whole emirate of Abu Dhabi, which is this whole southern part, doesn't have any Street View. This is all unofficial, and on the island there's a tiny amount, but yeah, it's only the other emirates up north that have Street View. Kind of interesting. But Oman, as they've really expanded Oman, it's actually a crazy density that Oman has now. So many random roads where there's nothing happening. Like, it's very cool, but at the same time, Oman's quite a boring country, so it's a bit of a shame that they didn't have this kind of zeal for, I don't know, some other countries that they could have done.
Major data gaps. Some parts of the world have little to no mapping coverage, not because of conflict or politics, but simply because no one lives there. In places like northern Canada, vast stretches of tundra, frozen lakes, and forests extend for thousands of kilometers, with almost no permanent settlements. There are no roads to capture, no buildings to map, and harsh weather makes fieldwork or Street View expeditions nearly impossible. Similar conditions exist in parts of Siberia, Greenland, and the interior of the Sahara Desert, where temperatures, terrain, and isolation make mapping extremely challenging and, in many cases, unnecessary. Even in technologically advanced countries, regions such as Alaska's Arctic coast or Australia's central deserts remain largely unmapped beyond satellite imagery. These areas may cover massive landmasses, but host only a handful of people. For mapping companies, the cost of sending vehicles or drones to document these places far outweighs the benefit. As a result,
well, we're talking Google Street View here, right? And a lot of these places do not even have streets. Like, you could connect Australia, and I think they probably eventually will, along a dirt road that runs from Northern Territory to Western Australia, but it's a dirt road. It's not like a proper street. And so you could say, like, in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, pretty much every street that you could talk about is covered. Or major road that's actually tarmacked. Probably there's some exceptions, actually, like Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba. There's like some northern roads that aren't done yet, but like the vast majority really are, even in Russia, I would say.
The global map reflects not just human technology, but where humans actually live. Beyond Google's official mapping cars, there exists another layer of Street View, the unofficial one, built by ordinary people. In regions where Google's cars never reached, like parts of Saudi Arabia, Iran, or remote African and Asian areas, locals and private contributors have stepped in using the Street View Trusted or Photosphere features. These are 360-degree photos uploaded by individuals, often using smartphones or special cameras. While they don't form a continuous map like Google's official coverage, they give glimpses into places otherwise invisible to the world.
The voice has to be AI. I've decided.
Saudi Arabia, for instance, users have captured streets around Riyadh and Mecca despite the absence of an official rollout. These user-made images show how people are curious and proud to share their surroundings, proving that even in places where mapping is limited or forgotten, people still find a way to put themselves on the map.
And it's interesting, like, they're back in like just post-COVID, when I started joining the community for GeoGuessr, everyone was super, super pessimistic about Google Street View, because they basically thought Google kind of gave up on doing its own images in new countries and just wanted the unofficial coverage to happen. But fortunately, they kind of changed their mind on that, and now they're really and pretty aggressively, expanding to a bunch of countries. Now, what we really need next is a bunch of Caribbean countries and a bunch of Pacific islands with the new small camera that they're rolling out, the one that they sent to India. We really got to get that in some of these remote islands, which, yeah, there is like impetus from those countries to actually have Street View, so it would make sense.
Google Street View is more than a map. It's a reflection of our world. It shows where freedom, wealth, and connection exist, and where they don't. Even with its gaps, it keeps growing, powered by people everywhere who want their stories and places to be seen. Thank you for watching.
I don't know. It was an okay video. I did not really learn a single thing from it, but did prompt some interesting discussions. And there you go. Maybe, hopefully my comments along with it was a nice compendium for you guys, so that you don't have to, I don't know, so that you guys can, we can have an interesting conversation in the comment section. But I don't know, Google Street View. I kind of want to just like open up a Google Maps here and just like have a look. Like, what are some interesting cases? What are some countries that you really would think would have Street View? Well, like Georgia is getting Street View. You can see there's tons of unofficial Street View in Georgia already. But Georgia is getting Street View, and that makes a lot of sense. That's a country in the Western Sphere. I think also Armenia would make sense. And I think Azerbaijan also makes sense, given its like close friendship with Turkey, and it's also quite part of the Western Sphere, I would say. Other countries that would make sense to get, I mean, I think a lot of Africa will come. I would love to see Ethiopia, but there's a lot of Africa that can come. I would say like Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania surely has to come eventually. Uganda, full coverage in Uganda would be cool, and I think would be quite possible. Probably West Africa's a mixed bag. I'm not really sure. Like Algeria, Morocco, and then Tunisia. Probably you could do all three of those, including Tunisia with an update. Laos, they could definitely do. Myanmar's obviously not going to be for a while. I think Pakistan they could do. I don't know what the laws are in Pakistan, but given that India just got full Street View, and look at the density here, it's actually pretty wild. Look at all these like tiny roads with a tiny bit of Street View, but like it is pretty crazy the density that India's received. But they could do it in Pakistan. They could definitely do it in Saudi Arabia, which they will probably. Kuwait, Bahrain, Lebanon. They could get the good camera too. So there's a lot of countries where the political and economic kind of situation makes sense for it to get Street View, I would say. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say. Really looking forward to like seeing a lot of these islands, and a lot of these islands eventually get them, because you can see they have unofficial Street View already. Hope you all enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought of the reaction. If there's any other similar videos that are better that you want to see, also let me know, and goodbye.